Liet. Tonight we're going to be talking about magic and how reckless it is to try things without even thinking about what the effects of those things could be, such as pointing at a random manservant and saying, Shabal.
All right, and while we wait for my co-host Adam to wake up, welcome to this episode of the 800's. I am your other co-host, Alex, and welcome back, Adam, from paternity leave. I'm sure that nap was very much needed.
Yes, thank you.
And with that, why don't we quickly get a word from our plugs and sponsors.
Oh, yeah, so if you joined us before we went live, you heard some cool music from Incompetech. It was Fearless First. You can check out other music they have at incompetech.filmmusic.io. We really like Incompetech. We use them for our podcast, Roll with Advantage, and obviously this show. So give them a check out. Also, if you want to check out some of our old shows, you can check them out right here at Twitch, or you can check out our YouTube channel where we have some other different kind of videos. And as always, I enjoy listening to books instead of reading them in hard format. But if you want to too, I highly suggest you check out Audible, and you can get a 1 month free subscription if you go to dmstable.com/audible. Whew. And finally, we have a Patreon, which is the main way we vote on what book to run next. So we're finishing up our next vote at 8:45 tonight. So we'll find out what our on-deck book will be tonight. And if you want to vote on future books, join Patreon. And if you want to vote on tonight's book, then go ahead and join tonight during the stream and get in that vote last second.
Just $2 a month. That's all you need to get in on the sweet, sweet book action. All right. And this week on the 800's, we will be discussing the first book of the Mageborn series, The Blacksmith's Son by Michael G. Manning, Dewey Decimal Designation 813.6. Centered around Mordecai, the titular blacksmith's son, the story opens with his origins, assassination, daring rescues, a mother's sacrifice, and an epic secret all lead the infant Mordecai to come into the care of the blacksmith of the Duchy of Lancaster. Fast forward to teenage Mordecai, who believes himself to be but a humble commoner. But in a moment of desperation, he possesses a horse, walks on water. His life becomes anything but common.
Yes, definitely. And tonight, I'll give you a quick rundown if you're joining us for the first time. Alex and I are going to pose questions or topics to talk about. We'll talk about them between both of us. And if you guys watching have anything to say, go ahead and add it in the comment section, and we'll try and catch up with you and have a conversation with you there. As well as if you have anything you'd like to add, go ahead and add it in the comment section, and we'll try and address it and talk about anything that our viewers want to talk about.
All right, and our quick little episodally given disclaimer, this is not meant to be necessarily a kids show. Kids are welcome, but at parental discretion, because while we don't try to swear or anything, we do handle adult themes a lot of the time, and a couple might pass their lips. Also, we're trying to create a welcoming and supportive community of people who get to share their interests and just have fun together. And in that spirit, be nice or fuck off.
It gets me every time.
I know, right?
All right. All right, well, let's jump right into it, shall we?
Absolutely.
Okay,
looking forward to it.
Alex, what was your first impression of the book?
Well, aside from the fact that it was just our first shorter high fantasy novel, like it's by far the shortest in that category, so I had to kind of come at it at a different angle. it felt a little slow at times just because there's clearly a lot of foundation laying for like a series here. And I felt that throughout the entire thing. There's some cool parts, don't get me wrong. Just like I felt a lot of foundation laying, and I was just like, I want a little bit more. But so that's interesting. A lot of potential, likable characters, but because it's shorter and because it's foundation laying, I didn't feel like it was quite as nuanced as some of the other high fantasies that we've read, which at times could be a little rough, but it was still enjoyable. So
Yeah, I gotta say, for me, I've read this book and the rest of the series many times, both physically and audibly. One of the reasons why I suggested this book for the 800's is because, in my mind, it's a perfect example of an author who is good at one thing, but is lacking in one very specific other area. And for me, Michael G. Manning, and by the way, if you're watching, I love you, so take the next sentence with a grain of salt. But his storyline for me was compelling, but his writing was basic. Like, it wasn't super in depth. There wasn't a lot of detail. Like, it didn't really. There wasn't subtlety in his writing. It was.
well, yeah, I think that's exactly what I was getting at with it. It just didn't feel quite as nuanced as some of the other books that we got into, yeah, especially for high fantasy. I mean, it does fairly well for a shorter book, but like you said, there's so much potential there. It feels like you just want a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually like that you suggested a book like this because it definitely is a different read from what we've been doing so far.
I always like coming back to them when I'm feeling some light reading, or if I read Sanderson for 6 months straight, and I'm like,
way to take my final impression. Like, we'll circle back around to that one.
Yeah, but I always equate it to, like, it feels like something that is a stereotypical new author kind of writing.
So this was his debut book, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, you can kind of feel that, and I'm wondering, because I haven't read the rest of the series, I haven't read any of them before, so I'm coming at this very new. For anybody you say who might enjoy the story and want to know if it's worth it to continue, does he get a little bit better as he goes?
Yeah, I think he does. The remaining books in the series, so there's 4 remaining books, and then there's two separate book series from this one that Manning wrote in the same universe. He explores a lot of different writing styles in those other series. So if this is like, you kind of like the story, you kind of like the world, but the it's Mordecai reliving the past kind of thing just puts you on edge. His other series are kind of different from that, so I'd suggest checking those out. But to get more on point, yeah, the remaining books go a lot more in depth. He really opens up the magic system in the second book of the series. He opens up what an archmage is in the third book. He explores more sensitive topics. Some different themes come out, and yeah, he does open up as an author. I think there's still a little bit of that.
Well, that's good to know. I don't want to get too far afield from this particular book, but I think V.S. Drake brings up a good point. It's got good imagery, but is lacking to depth to some degree. That's what you were saying, Adam. I actually really agree with V.S. Drake's point about having a hard time with the way he went about the point of view change, because he's got Mordecai telling it from the future, so it's all in past tense.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's second present, it's like third present tense for anybody else who's randomly thrown in there. Now, contextually for the storyline of the book, it was necessary. I feel like it was a good thing to do. It just felt a bit clunky.
Yeah.
Like some of the most compelling scenes actually happened in those third person sections. Like, I think the first one we get, the one that comes to mind specifically as probably the most emotionally evocative scene is the first third-person scene that we get from Penny.
Yep.
Which is, if there is a trigger warning to be had in this book, that's the one. It is super dark. Warning to anybody who might be watching this who's thinking about reading. We'll circle. I think we should circle back to that because I want to lay some context for this by going through the books. So before we get in, I think we actually have covered a lot of what we feel this brings for literary value. So why don't we dive into the plot a little bit here? So any thoughts on what you think was what were your theories once you had read the prologue? Like, and this is to go out to our listeners, like, who was attacking the family, you know, why were they attacking them? Like, what were your thoughts initially when it starts off with, you know, so much intrigue and action?
Yeah.
And then it's just like it feels a little bit like Hercules, the Disney movie.
Yeah.
You know, like, except there's no, like, it's a lot more shadowy in the dark. We don't know who's actually pulling the strings behind what was happening. So I'm wondering if anybody out there had any theories about what was going on right from the beginning.
So the first time I read this book, I took that intro prologue, or is prologue the right word?
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think that's what the audiobook said. Is with the prologue.
So the beginning part with Mordecai's biological parents, preface, that's probably a good word, Fiastrake.
Yeah.
I honestly, I took that as just story setup, and I didn't think it was going to come back to anything. I thought Manning just wanted an orphan wizard, so he created the story of a wizard who got killed. But obviously, for later down, that wasn't the case.
I had the same thought initially, like, all up until the point where the mother left a letter. I was like, she left a letter for the future. It's got to come back to this. And then my gears started turning. I'm like, who the heck are these people in the shadows? Like, was it something as simple as, like, just a rival nobleman or lord or king or something? Or is it something a bit more shadowy and mysterious? Because we really don't know anything about his parents other than his mother was a bit of badass, saved his life and managed to, like, bring him to the people who would eventually raise him, you know. And especially later in the book, when we realize that this world is very much based on your typical medieval, fairly chivalric but pretty misogynist times. You know, a female being that much of a badass is, like, that much more of a like, I got to think about this because it doesn't fit the mold of the world type of thing. At least not a physical, I'm gonna beat your ass badass anyway.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, to that point, really liked a lot of the female characters in this book. Like, it was nice to see them be pretty strong and multidimensional.
Yeah, but that is a neat aspect. It's very two-sided, not just I'm a man. The other thing too that the beginning had me thinking was, this book is called The Blacksmith's Son. Obviously, right away we figure out that it's not the blacksmith's biological son.
Yeah.
But, I really thought blacksmithing was going to come in more. Like, I was like, all right, where's the blacksmithing? It's just like a afterthought, but it's the entire title of the book, you know?
Yeah, so did I. I had that. I was expecting some, like, forging magic or something to come in, like something special like that. And that might come in like later books. I don't know. Don't spoil. But for this one, really, like, the only forging aspect other than his dad doesn't typically make weapons and eventually makes him a sword. like, that's about it. And it wasn't a disappointment, but like, it was definitely subverted expectations. V.S. Drake also mentioned his theory in the beginning was he figured that it was just world building on mage lore, which is, probably a lot more accurate than any of my guesses. So
Yeah. All right, my turn to pose a question.
all right, what you got for us?
So after the prologue, the scene's set a little bit with the adopted parents, and then Mordecai takes the fateful trip towards the river, sees the horse, and then does the mind swap with the horse. So my question is kind of similar to what you asked with the intro, like what were your impressions of the magic, and did you find it, I don't know,
let's keep this broad. Let's keep this broad. We can bring it up in discussion and bring up smaller questions. But yeah, what were your first? Let's put that as the question. What were your first impressions of the first uses of magic? Especially when we get into like the very first, and I'll answer while you're putting up that question, Adam. Especially when we get into the first aspects of him using it to essentially astral project, then possess a horse and make it walk on water. We've been reading so much about these very structured forms of magic. It felt very unstructured from the very beginning. Like, this has a lot of potential to be a lot of things, but it's hard to make magic like that feel earned, at least in the beginning, because like, oh, you can just manipulate anything in the world just because you can. Like, there seemed to be no specialty, but as we all know, as you go through, he's I actually like the way that Manning did this. It was actually some of my favorite parts of the book is he has Mordecai writing a book as the heretic, explaining how the magic system works in slow pieces, and then you eventually get these little pieces, like examples of them as you go through. And I actually really like that style because he took something like, oh, this has unlimited possibility, which could either be really good or really bad, and then he slowly sets a little bit of rule to it, and it makes it that much more. I thought it made it easier to accept that way.
Yeah, he added constraints without having that awkward, the main character has to talk to somebody about magic conversation so that you know how the magic works.
Well, the whole premise of the book is he has no one to talk up to about it. Like, so he didn't really have a lot of choice there if you wanted to keep that, but I do like the way that he worked around it. So,
yeah. So my first impression of his use of magic is, point one, can he possess anything? And point two, holy cow, that's OP. How can anybody stand against him? And then point three, he never possesses anyone ever again in the entire book.
Yeah, V.S. Drake actually brings up the same exact point. He said it was odd because it was a good intro, but he starts controlling his magic. It never happens again. Like, well, because I think part of that is he eventually adds structure himself when he finds out that there's a language part to it. And I think he only said at one point he only found one word relating to the mind at any point, and he uses it to essentially like mind meld somebody.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if later it might come up more because he finds the words to better control it, because it's kind of like you said in your little attention grabber, at least he's smart enough not to try and throw his spirit outside his body without a little control again, because who knows if you're ever going to get back.
Mordecai's travels are very much, well, that was stupid, I shouldn't do that again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, what does he say? Stupid never dies. He says it like 10 times in the book.
Yeah, and again and again and again in the rest of the books too.
Yeah, because Drake mentions that he believes it was a good way to show how dangerous magic can be to new users, particularly those without guidance, and I agree. It sometimes feel like it sometimes though when he did it though, it made the plot armor that much more obvious. Like you couldn't forget about it because there is so much of Mort from the future, because obviously he makes it to that point.
Yeah, to tell
But
the story.
but I think he did a good job of subverting that by bringing elements of danger to other characters. Because so many people, when they write books, or at least books that I've read, that imminent danger tends to be to it might be to a town, but ultimately it's resting on the shoulders of the protagonist. And in this case, they very much made sure that you were worried about other people.
Yes, V.S. Drake, Athar, and Alar are very close sounding, and you got to remember what book you're reading.
Well, it also doesn't help if you're reading audiobook, having to yeah, call back. So yeah, it's one of those things where I agree. It was a little bit hard to keep track of. It was almost easier to keep track of the concept than it was the actual name for anything, as far as the magic system goes.
Yeah, well, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with Mort's own experience, right? Because he has no experience with it, so it's not like he's gonna know the right words to use. So he kind of fumbles through it, and then he goes, "Oh, that was Athar," or "Oh yeah, that's what I did there when I possessed the horse." And
Well, half the time it wasn't even like that explicit. It was just kind of passively like, you should understand this from the bit of, his diary or whatever it is that is at the beginning of each chapter, is like hinting at the reader like, huh, we did it. Huh? You see that?
why is it Mort? All right, let's talk about V.S. Drake's question.
All right.
Who do you like more, Quoth or Mort?
Um Honestly, I would have to say Mort is more likable. They both have that air of a bit of I don't know. Sometimes the things that they do feel a bit unearned because they just happen to be good at everything except talking to girls.
You have that in common.
But at least Mort owns it a little bit. You don't have any of the arrogance of both, or not most of the arrogance of both.
That hot-headedness really isn't there for Mort. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a little bit of that, but like it definitely not to the same degree. And like he has some confidence without it necessarily seeming like he's smug or smarmy most
So
of the time.
for those of you who don't know, Quoth is from The Name of the Wind, which is my example book when I'm reading in front of the camera. And for me, I like Quoth in terms of story. I think he's built a little more in depth. He has better flaws than Mort does. But I like Mort more as like, if I were to be a friend to one of them, I think I'd be more likely to be friends with Mort.
I think that's a great way of saying it. I'd be very tempted to, kick both in the shins. V.S. Drake said that he believes they're very similar characters. Yeah, I agree. There's some very similar elements. Again, this idea that they are, kind of that geek fantasy person, the person who is smart but slight, somehow also strong and cool. It plays very much into that typical geek fantasy, like geek high fantasy character. But yeah, that V.S. Drake mentions that he's not that Mort isn't as critically flawed as both. So again, that makes him a bit more likable. I mean, the actual depth of character part, I think, Mort has how many pages to develop as opposed to both in the first book. Like there's about a 500-page differential there.
Yeah, 272 for Mort, and I don't know, 700 for Quoth. I actually kind of disagree. I think Quoth's flaws make him more solid. Like I feel like he's more real because of his flaws.
Well, I think what V.S. Drake, and correct me if I'm wrong, meant by critically flawed is that difference between I would hang out with them and not. Not so much like critically as in like critically acclaimed, like that was bad writing. It's actually good writing that he has those flaws. I think he just meant like as far as likability goes, both is much more critically flawed.
Yeah.
Although
okay.
I will say the part that I think the thing I dislike the most about Mort though is, and maybe this is a bit the writing, is the whole bumbling misunderstanding thing. Like, and that's a bit on Penny in particular. Like, let the dude get a sentence out. But
one of the most cringiest tropes in writing is the not sharing of critical information between two main characters, and it's so hard to read.
Yeah, I hate that because like in real life, yeah, sometimes that happens, but it just I might not have been in those life and death situations that they're in some of these things, but it's never that misunderstood so many times.
Mm-hmm.
Especially not when a character actually has the time to sit down, realize that she probably jumped the gun on something, come back to the conversation, and then proceeds to jump the gun again.
It was slightly compelling in Blacksmith's Son.
It is. He uses it to somewhat good effect, but
I did have that urge to continue reading instead of going, "Oh, this is stupid. I'm done." You know.
I did have to set it. I did have to pause for a bit when it was happening because I was just like, cringe.
So let's talk foreshadowing.
All right, yeah. So,
what did you think of that part where Mort gets invited to stay with Mark and the rest of the Lancasters, and they're all just cool, pretending he's a noble and all that?
Yeah, that whole situation, like they said it. Manning does a decent job of setting it up. Like, oh, they're generally a lot better about the whole class differential, class system thing than most stereotypical nobles in these books or any, even real life sometimes. But so he sets that up as kind of a, oh yeah, they're just like that with everybody, and they kind of are. Like, they're definitely like nobles that don't feel like assholes. But I don't know, I always had a feeling right from the beginning that there was something more going on there. There's something that they know. Like, I at first I thought, like, until we found out that there were no other mages, at first I thought they had like somebody in secret who like could find other mages or something, like or a book or something that allowed them, and they had pinpointed him as a potential mage, and that's why they kept him around. That was my theory going in, is like they know he has magic even though they're trying to keep it a secret, and they've known for a long time. Yeah. I just assumed it was a more magical reason why they knew.
Because we, the reader, know Mort's not the blacksmith's son.
Mage Yellow Pages. Sorry, that one got me. Yellow Mages.
Why hasn't the mage Elenial been stricken from the Yellow Pages? Why is he still? Oh, Mordecai. That's a common Elenial name. No, but I'm right there with V.S. Drake. When they were like, oh yeah, you can stay in the best room, and yeah, totally, you can pretend to be a noble this weekend. Yeah, sure, whatever. I was like, okay, they know who he is. They know that he's adopted. They know that he came from Cameron, and they know the whole thing, and they're just sitting there going, this is the weekend.
Yeah, I didn't quite jump to that quite so fast. Like I figured it was an option, but I was just like, well, maybe I wanted there. I think that was just me projecting my desire for more, to get a little more in depth into like how magic works in the world. And at that point, it's pretty minimally explored. It definitely goes into it more, and I knew well before they actually revealed it that they knew. But at that point, when he gets invited, I was still skeptical. Phineas Drake apparently called the father right away. I mean, it's there. The clues are definitely there. I just had blinders on. All right, so once we're in the castle, we've been through a few chapters, and we're starting to figure out, um, the different types of mages and where they are. What did you figure Mordecai was once we had started learning what those were? And did you figure, and did you um, pin anybody else as a potential mage?
So, when you mean different mages, are you talking about like?
Well, the different like subcategories, like the Stoics, the I forget which ones are like basically pure sight based.
Uh,
Uh, they mainly come about as saints, healers, wizards, um, things like that. Like, where did you feel like Mort fell on that spectrum?
I felt like he was obviously somebody who. What were the specific characteristics that Marcus the heretic called out? Um, he obviously had
He obviously had the
the
sight.
like he had the high level of sensitivity. Was it?
Yeah, there's a high level of sight and then a high level of so yeah,
Capacity.
sensitivity, capacity, that's the word. So yeah, sensitivity and capacity, and he had the sensitivity. We didn't know about the capacity. Um,
Yeah.
because we know he can do stuff, but we didn't know how limited it was. But through those descriptions, this is partly because he's the main character of the book, but I assumed he was going to be a wizard, and I even from that point assumed that there's got to be something above and beyond with this kid, like beyond just a wizard. Like I don't know, like sage was the word that came to my head, but you mentioned an archmage when you were talking about later books,
Yeah.
and
There's one.
healed bone.
Yeah.
um,
I think that was to set the fact that. Oh. Okay.
oh, sorry about those technical difficulties for those watching. Uh,
We're talking
so
about Mordecai and what he is.
yep, and
I think I think the river scene kind of lends credence to that. He was going to be a mage or wizard eventually, because he used magic. He was able to reach his mind out and affect the world. I think that pretty much qualifies on both sensitivity and capacity. Um, what I found interesting and what we were kind of talking about potentially while we were quiet, the uh, the sensitivity aspect, with healing.
mhm.
I think the part where he can heal himself is Manning's way of saying Mordecai is stupid sensitive. He's probably the highest there ever is.
Well, and the fact that he's able to do it without any sort of training, and we hear Mordecai saying it's a shame that this knowledge was lost, when he's doing his little read from his book
Yeah.
as the heretic, you know, it is pretty. Well, the thing is like I have a pretty decent knowledge of biology through like my um, biopsychology background and or health psychology background rather, and like the way that Manning describes the magic system shows that you have to have like a complex feeling of how the body works, and to have that, I think you're absolutely right. That just shows that he has to be bonkers sensitive, and not just to do it himself, but especially to apply that to somebody else. But that may also be a capacity thing, but it has to be sensitivity too, to realize that what's different and what's the same without assuming that everything is different or everything's the same. Like the intuition in that is nuts to me. Like to just get that.
So, what did you think of Devin Tremont?
He was easy to hate, almost a little too easy. Felt a little two-dimensional. It got a little bit more complex when we find out that he's a channeler for a dark god, which was the other possibility that Mort might have been like secretly there was a god playing behind the scenes. I thought maybe, but turns out no. It's
Well,
I just he's so easy to hate because he's just everything wrong with stereotypes for nobility, for just general narcissistic jerks, and you know he's a oh, I'm not gonna shy away from this. He's a fucking rapist.
yeah, I feel like so. Obviously, Manning set up Devin to be the worst of nobility from the Middle Ages. I definitely think that he could have written him to be a lot more dark than what he was, just because of the time that this story would have taken place in, had a lot of dark stuff that would go on. But I also think that that's not really the feel Manning was going for in his book. So I understand why he went as deep as he did. You know, he wanted to outline the fact that this guy's a stuck-up dick, and let's not get into it and destroy people's mentality while they're reading the book.
Well, yeah, V.S. Drake mentions that he thought he was a great villain, but he, like, where do you go from there? And I actually think you might be right on that, Adam, is Manning was trying to keep you in this book while setting up for something potentially bigger. He's like, this is how bad things could get with an already bad person. But this person clearly has a lot of flaws. They don't have a lot to them other than being smart, have access to magic, and they're a terrible person. So, like, it leaves an opening for something more complex to fill the void. And what it did is it allowed him to get a complete story arc into this one short book. And I think that was a good idea, honestly, because it feels like there's a sense of completeness to the book in that regard, because there's a conclusion. But yes, V.S. Drake, he did get less than he deserved, for sure. But it opens up a lot of possibilities for what comes next. And I think a lot of that, and this is going to be a little bit on the prediction side of things, is going to be related to the dark gods and whatever cult the priest or whatever the one dude was who's going to poison the entire castle. Yeah, I think it's going to get a lot more into that.
Yeah, the children of Malgaroth will come in center stage.
Yeah, and an organization has a lot more potential complexity to it than a single person, and that's and it was just showing that Mort has the capability to take on a single person. So where do you go from there? You go to a group or you go to something cosmic. And it sounds like a group is where he's heading.
Well, anyway, I won't get into the next book too much, but
VS Drake's making a request if we can get into talking about Penny and Lady Hightower and their relationship and as characters. And I very much would definitely love to roll in with that. But why don't you, so I'll, while you're posting that question,
I can talk about it.
All right,
yeah. I really liked the relationship between the two. I liked how Manning wrote that, like, Rose isn't stuck up. Like, she's the exact opposite of Devin. You know, she sees Penny and she's like, this is a potential friend, not this is a servant who I can do whatever the I want with. I really liked that he closed a lot of gaps that Penny had with Rose. Like, Penny had no idea what to do as a noble's girlfriend. And Rose stepped in to make sure that she knew what to do. And Penny had nobody to turn to when the worst happened, and Rose stepped up and made sure that she had somebody to talk to. So it's a really good relationship, and I really like that he threw that in there.
Yeah, and one of the things that I actually really appreciate is that it was a woman coming to another woman's rescue and not this just a pure damsel in distress situation. I mean, that's kind of what happened while she was unconscious, but he allowed it to develop in a way that, at least psychologically speaking, Rose is the one who saved Penny. She's the one who snaps her back into it, keeps her going, gives her things to do, and makes sure that she has what she needs emotionally. And while I really like that they had that dynamic going. And yet she's also a femme fatale, as V.S. Drake said. She's total badass, as he said. She's clearly highly intelligent. While there is clearly interest between her and Dorian, it's not what her character is all about. She's a well-rounded character and is one of my favorite, like, one-to-one dynamics in the entire book is those two.
Yeah, while you were talking, that kind of popped in my head that, like, Mordecai physically saved Penny, Rose mentally saved her.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, Penny doesn't even know that he physically saved her until, like, basically, like what, the last quarter of the book. Like she spends half the book pissed at him because she won't listen. But again, I wonder if maybe that was deliberate just so that Manning would have a chance to let that relationship between Lady Hightower and Penny develop. You know what?
Yeah, that's a good point. As a literary drive, it did definitely let their relationship develop because Penny had no idea.
If that actually makes me feel a lot better about, like, some of the choices that he's making, and makes me want to read more books, because if Manning can make smart choices like that and really bring about characters and interactions that we love, it makes me want to read more. And I love when authors do that, and it makes me more willing to look past the faults, especially because when I see smart decisions like that, the more you write, the more of those smart decisions you're going to end up making most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time, not always, but, like, yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, VS Drake, because I really wanted to talk about them as well. I also like that the Duchess is kind of in on all of that too, and she doesn't have as nearly as prominent of a role, but when she comes in, she's not just like some bird on a pedestal, like a trophy on a pedestal type of queen, like Duchess.
Mm-hmm.
She actually comes in, really gets in it with the other characters, and provides support, advice, and does so without, like typically when I see characters like that, if they're going to be helpful, it's kind of in a negative way, but she's like actually legitimately supportive and good, and there's nothing that detracts from that because it doesn't have to, because that's how the character was built, and I really like seeing that.
So let's talk the end battle. One of the things I really find interesting is the whole Penny tries to assassinate Devin, and then Mort tries to kill Devin because Devin stopped Penny. Like, I don't know, how did that make you feel? The whole, you want Mort to kill Devin because Devin's a dick, but it's totally unjustified. Like,
Wait, unjustified how?
like Devin had every right to attack Penny. Penny was trying to murder him.
Well, I mean, you have to remember though, Mort comes in late. He doesn't see any context other than his girl getting pummeled by the man who attempted to rape her. Like he doesn't have all of the context. So him flying into a rage is a bit more I was understanding of it, but ultimately I was frustrated with the whole scene because a lot of it it's built on that same premise of the misinterpretation stuff that I sometimes find hard to read, because like, just communicate, people. Like that would have subverted so much. I get that's not what drives the story, and I have to let that go. But it's such a frustrating thing to read sometimes. I mean, it's a fun scene to read, in part because I was frustrated by it. But I thought his move was justified. Penny's absolutely was, like, the dude. But if they would have just communicated and coordinated, maybe he would have known that there's a magic protection, because he knows that he probably used magic on her or something anyway.
I think so. I feel like.
Sorry,
I feel like
mentioned that there's a catharsis to this. What did you think about that comment?
I don't know what catharsis means. That's what I think about that comment.
Catharsis means a helpful release of emotion, or
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it was justified to try and kill Devin because nobody's life was imminently in danger from Devin.
I would.
That okay? He was dancing. You can't just kill somebody for dancing, let's not argue about
it. Agree to disagree.
So, like, if in our society, right, you can't, no matter what somebody does in the past, if they're not posing a threat, you can't just kill them.
Okay, so if we're judging by real world standards, totally different story. Like, I'm judging based in if I was living in that world, in that world's rules, and in that world's culture, where it doesn't seem like that's the case, then it's justified. But like,
even in that world's culture, it was justified. Devin is allowed to force himself on people if he wants. He's the son of a duke.
Well, I was thinking more like, in this world, I have options to go after somebody because they're not presumably they're not protected by status. I mean, I get it doesn't always work out that way, but at least there's courses of action. And in that world, you just don't. It's just, yeah, he gets to. He might get a fine slap on the wrist, but he gets to. And, so yeah, maybe killing wasn't the justified, but he did need a severe beating. Like,
I feel like, so for me, that scene, I feel like if I was there and somebody was like, "Oh my God, somebody stop Mort," I'd be like, "No, don't do it, Mort. No, what are you doing? Do you need a sword? I mean, stop."
Yeah.
But yeah, like he totally deserves it and stuff. But
So
it's
okay,
it
so
whether or not it's
morally
just
deserves it, ethically unjustified.
yeah.
All right, there you go. That damn guard, yes, very much so.
The guard that gave Devin a sword. I'm going to remember you.
Okay,
I won't
here's a
forget that.
character though that I want to talk about because we have skipped over him quite a bit, but he was actually my favorite male character by far, and that is Dorian. Uh, you know, we haven't really talked much about Dorian or Mark. So of like the main male characters, Mordecai, Dorian, any of the or Mark or any of the other male characters, who is your favorite
Uh,
and why?
Dorian, definitely Dorian. He's the classic knight in shining armor. His moral code is awesome, right? Like he's got
Mhm.
that moral code that he sticks to no matter what. And I absolutely love that and wish I personally was more like that instead of, sometimes the negative thoughts that pop into my head. I'm like, oh man, I wish I was more like Dorian and didn't think like that. But he's a great role model character, and he's somebody that I think I could see myself naming a child after or something.
Possibly.
Meta-wise, I named my kid Dorian.
Yeah, I figured. Okay, I wasn't gonna say anything, but I did want to bring it up because I did not want to, miss that chance to potentially figure out if that was a at least partial namesake.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, but I completely agree. He acts as this moral guidepost for his friends, and I like that he doesn't. He is who he is, and he's the most consistent character probably through the entire series. Through the entire book, rather. I don't know why I said series because I've only read the one book, but uh,
True either
his
way.
he's steadfast, he's loyal. He, like you said, he is that very much so that white knight, but he's not full. I love that he does it without any sense of self-importance. He's humble on top of all of it, and that's the thing. Is like you see so many of these white knight characters that like think their farts don't smell, and or they have that arrogance to him, and he's got none of that. He's just there for people, you know. And I think that's actually probably one of the things that Manning did best was making really truly likable characters that make you want to see good things happen for them. You know, so yeah, I totally ship Dorian and Rose. um,
The two shining stars of the novel. Yeah, they can get together.
yeah, so Dorian was probably my favorite of them. Mark. One thing I didn't like about Mark though is I didn't like how he kind of devolved almost through the series. Like he started off what seemed like a really good best friend type of character, like who had a bit of a Prince and Pauper type of vibe between him and Mordecai, but eventually he just turns into I don't know. I just felt like there's something lacking there towards the end. Like this didn't feel like any development. If anything, it was almost in reverse. He wasn't ever a bad guy. It's just I don't know. I just didn't feel as much coming from him. But I'm with VS Drake. Definitely laughed at like half of the fight scenes with either of the Thorn Bearers in him, just going freaking berserker.
I think Mark was there to facilitate some of the setup for the story. He's there to help Mort understand noble life and be the brother he never had, kind of a deal.
V.S. Drake mentions that he thinks Mark was the rock and Mort's touchstone. I can see that to a degree. I actually agree with that. I just wish there was a little bit more development from him, not just like him being used essentially for exposition.
Yeah, I guess
Um,
that's true. He is kind of a surface level character in this book.
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing like where he potentially goes. Um,
All
it,
right, let's
I
in the essence of wrapping up, let's talk one more topic for the night and then get into our wrap up game.
all right.
So what do you
Um,
what do you want to talk about?
I wanted to do a prediction here for those of us who haven't read and
Prediction.
prediction for the how does Mort get the heretic moniker?
Um, so I think you're misremembering that part. It's Marcus the Heretic.
Oh, it is. Okay, well, dang. Uh, see, I had it in my head. I must have conflated them. Wow. Okay. I totally read the books. I swear. I swear. I swear. I swear. Okay, so then let's do that way. Who do you think Marcus the Heretic was?
That's a
And
good question. I cannot answer.
because I'm assuming. Um, oh, V.S. Drake thought it was Mort too, so I'm not alone.
Really,
Okay,
Marcus the Heretic.
I mean, it could be. What is Marcus the Heretic could just be like a pseudonym for Mort. Like that's possible. I I thought he would like. I thought it was Mort as well, but like now that I know that it's not, my guess is that he is actually a mage from the past who somehow is accessed or awakened in the present in Mort's present at some point future to this book. That's my guess.
Okay.
um, Short topic, I know. I just
Well,
was curious about
prediction
it.
prediction wise, what do you think is going to happen with Malgaroth? Do you think he's going to send more channelers at Mort? Do you think he's going to try and possess Mort himself? Is he going to come into the real world and attack him? What do you think is going to happen?
I think his end game is. I think his end game is real world manifestation. How he goes about that will probably be an escalation of sending channelers to him possessing somebody who's a bit more worthy than, or a bit more challenging than, this book's main jackass. Uh,
Yes, V.S. Drake. Mark's full name is Marcus Lancaster.
okay, well, thoughts abound on that one.
read,
So,
read and find out, as Sanderson is like to say.
okay, so new theory, Marcus. Okay,
Final
great,
thoughts.
great point there, VS Drake. So, final thoughts. I found it a relatively enjoyable book. It's a casual read. It's not. It is high fantasy, but it's not like super involved. So if you want some more casual reading, like you could probably knock this book out like as in bathroom reads in like a week. Like it's good, it's fun. I do want to continue with the series and I would recommend it. Just don't think it's going to be the most blow you away. Just take it for what it is. It's a good book with some good characters and elements that have a lot of potential. Some rough edges, but hopefully we'll get better because there are some really excellent parts to it. What about
I definitely
you?
agree with a lot of what you're saying there. Like I said at the beginning, it's a light read. It's not super dense. It doesn't make you question every little thing about each little paragraph. But it is. I absolutely love the story, uh, like the background and the general flow that the story takes is, to me, really entertaining. There's not really a point in there where I'm like, okay, let's get back to it, guys. It's a very catchy book with not a lot of fluff parts. So it definitely spurred me to continue reading, and I think Manning does improve with the things that he lacks in this book. So
Awesome to hear. So looking forward to reading some more of that. And VS Drake says, I'm not sure if that was supposed to be a hashtag, but it says asterisk pumped. All right, so why don't we get ourselves into wrapping up for this episode?
all right. Well, so the vote for next week, or the next book in line, is done. Let's talk about that real quick. So February, February. Sorry, I'm copying and pasting.
Yeah, it should be February 13th.
I have it, just copying and pasting. February 27 is the book that we voted on tonight, and that is Babel
7th or 14th. I thought it was the 13th.
So the book that we voted on tonight is the 27th. We have another one on the 13th.
Okay, I thought you said the 7th. I didn't hear the 20 before it, and I was like, what?
So Babel 17 by Samuel Delaney.
All right.
Read by February 27. And we also have in the works is The Travelers by Regina Porter. That's February 13.
Okay. Looking forward to both of those because that is our Black History Month. Just a reminder for those of you who might be new, Black History Month is through February. We're going to be doing Black American authors, and then we're going to roll into our Women's Appreciation through March. So if you have any great ideas for female authors of fantasy fiction or anything that would fit in the 800s, please reach out to us, and Adam will tell you how to do that.
Yes. So we primarily exist on Facebook and Twitter for communication purposes. So check us out at The DM's Table on Facebook and at DM's Table on Twitter. Check our posts. We post a ton around 800's time about what book we're going to be talking about and all that. And if you want to talk to us on a more regular basis, we have a Discord chat where we talk all things nerdy, including books. We can get you that invite if you hit us up on our Facebook or Twitter. And for everything DM's Table, there's dmstable.com, where you can find our podcast, Roll with Advantage, and more information on the 800s and some other side projects that we've got going on. So check that out. And like we plugged earlier, patreon.com/DM's Table for giving us a couple of bucks a month and letting us continue doing cool things.
Just $2. Oh, and also for those of you who do decide to send us any book suggestions, we do prefer that when you send them, if you can let us know if there are any potentially triggering events or like any trigger alerts that we should know about, or some very sensitive issues. Try and give us a heads up so that we don't vote on it and then get blindsided by it if we have to, cram for the 800s for whatever reason. So yeah, just this little note there. But otherwise, please send them to us, even if it's over Twitter, Facebook, or if you manage to join our awesome Discord. Look forward to seeing you there, and I think that's about it for today. So thank you, everybody, for joining us again.
You want to tell them about our month themes real quick?
I already did. Black History Month and Women's.
I missed that.
Yeah, I rolled it in, dude. We got this. High five.
Okay, thanks, guys, for joining us. See you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.